Happy Friday, folks. It's Jim here from Alvin Blanche, Australia. Just a few words to introduce ourselves. We've come up with this bright idea that we are going to have some sort of podcast type thing going on. Grain drain, mastering moisture. So grain drain obviously refers to the ability of our systems to reduce the moisture in a seed or in a kernel or some other material. So grain drain, mastering moisture. Hopefully you as a listener will spread the word and let people know that we're going to be out and about. The aim here is to allow our customers to explain a little bit about what they do, what they grow, and how they do it in terms of securing the crop at one of the critical points in the growing cycle. We hear quite often that it becomes a challenge if there's a weather event or there's moisture impacted crop in the paddock. People are challenged in terms of allowing a harvest crew to continue operating, whereas if we have a drying system on a property, the people can then manage moisture quite well. And in one client's opinion, a drying system is like having an additional header in the paddock. So something to think about over the next few weeks and months as we progress with grain drain mastering moisture. So who is this guy with the funny accent? Well, I'm actually a 50s baby, would you believe? Grew up on a family farm in northeast Scotland, and if I can share something here, hopefully you'll be able to see something on the screen right now. So this is the homestead. This is a property about 25 miles northwest of Aberdeen on the east coast of Scotland. This property here is still owned by a family who have been there since mum and dad left in the mid 90s, I think it would have been. So 100 odd acres. It's a mixed property. Dad always grew about 50 to 60 acres of cereal crops. So he had a bit of golden promise barley. He grew some oats. And latterly, before he retired, he grew a little bit of wheat as well. So he liked to grow a bit of cereal. He kept as much of the material himself to feed our cattle that were in wintered. I don't know if you can follow the arrow here. So this building here and this building here is where the cattle were kept indoors during winter. This area down here was a sort of double storage unit in that we kept grass silage in the bottom half, and then we stored barley and wheat and oat straw up on the top. So it allowed the cattle to come out from here and basically feed ad lib as and when they needed. So this is obviously taken through towards the end of summer. The silage clamp here is full, as you can see. The cattle are all out in the paddocks. At the front of the home here, we've got, I would suggest, we've got some root crop, probably turnips growing there for feeding the fat lambs that he would have bought from the Shetland Islands and later in the season. So all up, it was always a busy place to stay and work in. The building that you see here is it doubled up as workshop and grain drying shed. So my first introduction to grain drying was Dad's best mate was the local blacksmith, and he was always challenged. Dad was always challenged at harvest time with high moisture grain, in that it would probably have been 24 to 26%, and he was happy to send the contractor into the paddock to get the grain off. But as you all know, moisture at that level causes quite a problem in terms of being able to store a material. So over a couple of seasons, his best mate, the blacksmith, Charlie, came up with the plan to build a air duct, a tunnel concrete tunnel along the top side of this shed here, put a big old fan in this area here, and out here we had an old Fordson Major PTO tractor that drove the fan, that blew the air along the tunnel underneath a floor which was probably 500 mil deep. The air went underneath there. The grain was packed on top, maybe a metre deep, and the tractor and fan would run day and night to reduce the moisture. And it would maybe take a week to reduce this metre deep by maybe 20 metres long batch of grain. But it proved that with the right conditions, he could master moisture. So once they got that up and running, the following season, the blacksmith came up with a bright idea that if we added some heat to the front of the fan, they would be able to dry a little bit quicker. So they introduced an old, I think it was a central heating fan that they put in front of this unit, and fired it up. And sure enough, there was heat and steam and all sorts generated in the shed. The end result was he could dry grain a little bit quicker. So that was my introduction to grain drying. The other buildings, before we move on, this unit here was used for a single man accommodation, so that when Dad was in a position to employ somebody, there was a kitchen and very basic amenities for a single man to live in here. This building here would have been used to store root crops for preparation to take through to feed to the cattle. This one here was a grain store come car store, and the buildings down here were grain and equipment down in this area here. So all up, it was a very good lifestyle. Myself and my two sisters, we grew up there. As I said, 100 odd acres. He probably kept 50 to 60 cattle at all times, a couple of hundred feeding sheep through the winter. So it was a good life. But when I left school in the mid 70s, Dad said, go and get yourself a trade. There's not enough work here for two people. There's not enough income to, in time, generate a second home from 100 odd acres. So I left school mid 70s and I went and worked with the local Alvin Blanche dealer at the time. And the local Alvin Blanche dealer, he produced a range of conveying systems and installed grain dryers. So that kept us quite busy across quite a wide region in the northeast of Scotland there. I learned to weld, not farm weld, but properly weld gear together, well, most of the time. And it was, again, a steep learning curve, understanding how dryers operated and understanding how grain moved around in buildings, going to sites and working on sites and putting stuff up. Then we moved on after a few years. We worked with a local international harvester dealer at the time, just as they were changing to Case IH. So that was an interesting period. And then, as I said, 26 years ago, the big move happened, and we moved out here to manage or to set up the last wholly owned sales company for Valtra tractors, the Finnish tractor company. 2004, the business was sold on a global basis to a competitor who already had the infrastructure in place here in Australia. So the 14 staff that we had built up over the 4-year period, quite a high proportion of them moved to the new owner. They didn't need senior management, so Jane and I took garden leave. We went back to the UK, and Jane's idea was that we were going to go back and paint a home back there and put it on the market. But we ended up with a new kitchen, a new bathroom, a lot of painting, and about 3 or 4 months later, we eventually got back here. So we set ourselves up in business. We registered our operation in 2004 with the idea that we would go to manufacturers in Northern Europe who saw Australia and New Zealand as just a little bit too far. step too far. I reconnected with Alvin Blanche around about that sort of time, and I recall an early discussion with Andrew, and Andrew is the son of the founder of the business, Mr. Alvin Blanche. And this discussion was along the lines of, did they need assistance in Australia and New Zealand? And Andrew's response was, well, probably not in Australia, because he said that, I don't think we can sell dryers in Australia. It's too hot and too dry. You wouldn't need dryers. So we agreed on a way forward, and we started to work in New Zealand with the REL group and help them, talk to them and understand about how dryers are working in, or were working in, New Zealand. But at the same time, we were conscious that in certain areas here in Australia, as the listener would know, moisture is an issue in crops. So we fast forward to today. We've made over 45, I think it's maybe over 50 deliveries now in an area from Albany in West Australia to Cairns in far north Queensland. And we have a mixture of machines drying mainly wheat and canola, I have to say. But we are also drying material as obscure as banana waste with Banana Feeds Australia up in Cairns. We're drying lemon myrtle leaf up on the Atherton tablelands. We're drying Duboisia leaf around Kingaroy, and soon to deliver another drying system with our partner Brian Zielinski Engineering into that business, into that sector. Down south, we're drying wheat and barley grass in Swan Hill, and then across the river at Murray Downs, we're drying almonds, and we're drying almonds up around Mildura, Robinvale, Renmark. So we've got a myriad of crops that we're drying across the region. So that's basically us, or me, in a nutshell. I sit here on a day-to-day basis, and I talk to Chris, our GM, and we'll talk to Chris probably on the next episode. Chris has been on the road this week. He's about to leave for another 5 days on the road next week. So we'll try and catch up with Chris over the next week, 10 days, and find out about Chris's background, where Chris has come from, and what Chris does for Alvin Blanche Australia. As I say, our aim is to get out to our customer base, and ask 3 important questions for those guys that are happy enough to have a microphone put in front of them, or maybe even on camera. And it's simple questions. How many hectares do you farm? How long have you been using an Alvin Blanche dryer, or maybe even another dryer? And what impact has this had on the business? So we're curious. We would like to understand what impact the machine has had on the business. So it's Friday afternoon. Have a good weekend, folks, and we look forward to hearing about grain dryers and the impact that the double flow Alvin Blanche or the conveyor dryer has on businesses around Australia.